So I'm going to say hi and welcome to the Adversity Psychologist podcast. So I'm Dr. Tara Quincherillo, and today I have all the way over in Sydney, Australia, two fantastic guests. I'm going to let them each introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about what's brought them on today. Hi, I'm going to say good morning for me, but it's actually good evening for you guys, isn't it?
That's it. We're in the future.
You are. I've got to get my head around that. Who would like to go first? So we have Sarah and Alice. Who would like to start?
Okay, my name's Alice. I am 29, so verging on a very important birthday. I am a psychology student and I have a job at an educational institution, and I am also living with bipolar, and I've been through 2 psychotic episodes.
And I'm Sarah. I'm Alice's mum. I'm a registered nurse, and Alice and our oldest son, Jesse, and I have written a book called Dear Psychosis, and it's our family's journey with mental health, finding Alice overseas and bringing her home and going through treatment and what that was all like. So that's a little bit about us.
And I'm so honoured to have you on. So it's all right to say we've kind of got introduced to each other through another author who came on with another incredible story. So we have to give a little shout out, don't we, to say thank you, Mark, for introducing us, because he's also over in Australia as well, and you've met a few times, haven't you? It's just lovely to be put in touch with people who've been through these incredible journeys, and not only that are feeling able to share it. Because I think actually from today's episode, this is going to really help people. There's so much I want to get in. So let's get stuck in. So are you comfortable, Alice, telling us a little bit about your journey, what happened to you, the kind of beginnings of the story that's in this book?
Sure. Where to begin? It was a pretty long journey, I think, with mental health. And I sort of thought something was up when I was younger, but I'd been to a few psychologists. I went to 2 before I went overseas when I was 21. I just finished my Bachelor of Communication, and I went to Europe with my brother, his now wife, and their friend Michael, or Mika, we called him. And it just sort of ended up me alone in Istanbul with a bunch of friends, and I just lost touch with reality. Yeah.
And do you remember much else about that time, or does Mum want to tell us a little bit about what happened from her side of you during that time?
Oh, I remember a fair bit. I'm pretty lucky because I was safe during that time. But Mum would have got the shock of a lifetime when she received a strange message.
Yeah, so Alice had gone overseas with our son and his now wife, and they had left to come home, and Mika had gone on to Greece. So Alice had decided that she was going to go to Turkey and have some space by herself and just enjoy life. Yeah. So for that time, I was a little nervous, Alice being by herself, but she's 21, she's having a great time, and we decided that she'd be checking in via social media.
Yes.
So in the lead up to Alice having psychosis, she'd sent some strange messages, and I'd received these strange messages. One was one where we talked on Snapchat about some crystals, and during this I ran around the house finding a crystal that she wanted to see for some reason, and I ran around and I found about 5 crystals, and each one she'd go, no, that's not it. And it was a weird conversation, and when it finished, I shook my head and went, what was that all about? And lifted the carpet up and swept it under. Yeah. And then about a week later, I was at work. I'm a theatre nurse, so I was in the sterile stock room at work, and I received a message from Alice, which was a couple of pictures. And I opened the pictures up and I immediately lost my breath. And the pictures were of Alice with a roadmap of thick black marking pen all over her face.
Right.
And I immediately was, oh my God, what's happening? And one of my work colleagues happened to walk in and she said, what's the matter? And I started crying and she said, nothing can be this bad, Sarah. And I showed her the picture and it took her breath away and she had nothing to say. Her eyes became like saucers, and I texted Alice immediately and there was nothing. There was no reply
Right.
back. It was, I think, a further 24 hours before I got a message back with another photo going, ta-da, clean face. And then we rang and she said she was okay. So again, I picked up that carpet and swept my
Yeah.
concern
Yeah.
under it. And Alice continued on for the next day or two, and we continued on until I was ironically at a conference, a nursing conference called Wellness for Life, when I received a message from a stranger saying that he thought that Alice was having some sort of mental health episode.
Right.
Now, this is when do we believe this guy? Oh my God.
Well,
Then I remember,
absolutely.
yeah, the crystals, the photo, but is it a scam? It's all these
Yes.
things that are going up through my mind. And of course, the most important thing is Alice well?
Yeah.
So we need to contact her. So that's how it all started for me. In a lot of
thousands
shock.
of miles away as well. You know, this isn't something where you can just pop.
14,500 kilometres
Yes.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you say that about scam, because I'm really interested in the kind of brushing it under the carpet thing, because, you know, there are so many other things that might go through our minds as parents as to what it might be. You know, children do drink, dabble around recreational drugs, do pranks, you know, the Snapchat pranks, TikTok pranks. There's just so much. Because I'm just wondering, you know, how do you navigate that as a parent? You know, how do you know, or how, you know, is this a scam? Is it not? What did you do next?
So we had a choice. My husband happened to be playing golf that day, so it was me and my oldest son, who was in Melbourne at the time, doing his final year of medicine. And we both spoke to this fellow who'd contacted us, whose name was Hussein, and we believed him.
Yeah.
We had to, even though there was doubt, we decided we had to believe him. So within 24 hours, he and I were on a plane to Istanbul to see Alice, to actually see and touch her and see if she was okay.
Yeah.
My wish was that when we arrived that, you know, she would say, oh, hi, Mum, I'm glad that you're here. I'm sorry that you've come all this way. I haven't been feeling great. But that wasn't the case. When we arrived in Istanbul, Alice could barely talk. She whispered and mumbled. And the girl that we had spoken to 24 hours before on the phone was a completely different person that we arrived to. She was in the throes of psychosis.
Yeah. And just what that's like as parents
Mm.
in terms of managing. I'm sure it was a relief to get there and see her. Do you remember much about this, Alice?
Yeah, I remember being very stressed about their arrival. So I was hallucinating, like hearing voices and seeing things that weren't there, and had all sorts of delusions going on in my head about what they had to go through in order to be able to get on that plane and arrive here safely. So like, I believe that Mum had to have done things in her past life that weren't exactly what Mum would have liked to have done, and things like that. And that was really scary. And when she arrived, she didn't have her wedding ring on or any of her jewelry on, and that was terrifying because it sort of confirmed my delusions that she'd actually lost things because of me being sick. So yeah, I remember feeling very afraid.
So for people that are listening, I'm just wondering if people might not be familiar with kind of what psychosis is and how it presents. Delusions are the thoughts. So sometimes you can experience tricky thoughts, but as well as visual or auditory hallucinations as well. And not everyone has both of those, do they? So that's what's really important about spotting it. That's, for some people, they don't have the visual or the auditory hallucinations, I can't say it. They might just have changes in their thinking, which can be harder to spot as well, because sometimes you can behaviorally see somebody responding to voices and auditory hallucinations, can't you? I mean, when you first got there, were you aware what it was that you were facing? Because obviously you have a nursing background. How did you know what you were facing and what to do next?
Well, our first visual of Alice was at the airport, surrounded by these beautiful Syrian refugees who were displaced in Turkey from the war,
Right.
that had saved Alice's life.
That's
so
remarkable.
when they huddled Alice towards us at the airport and they released her to us, so to speak, Alice had, her hair was wrapped in a scarf with tufts of hair coming out. Her dress was on inside out and back the front, and on top of that dress was a skirt. So immediately we had a visual that things weren't okay, but it really wasn't until Alice spoke that we knew that we would have to come home to healthcare treatment and to get her home as fast as possible. So, and that meant going back through Ataturk Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world, without causing an international incident with someone in the throes of psychosis.
Well, I was just going to ask that. That's the tricky question is, did you feel well enough to be on a plane as a parent? How did you navigate that?
We had to, and this is a great question, because Alice was able to listen to us. She had thousands of voices in her head that were talking to her.
Yeah.
And Jessie had given her some headphones, and it ended up to be the best thing that had ever happened. And it was that he said, if you don't like the music that's on, press the button on the string, the cord of the headphone, and it will go to the next song. So Alice would, you take over, Alice.
He said one tap is pause, and two taps on the ear pod, the side of your ear, is skip. And so I took that as like pause your thoughts literally and skip your thoughts.
Yes. Yeah.
So I sort of forced myself into believing this, and it sort of helped, like not for very long all the time, but it just sort of relieved some of the pressure if I didn't like what was happening. Yeah.
So she would listen to us to some extent, and I think that's the only reason we were able to get her through security, through baggage check, through plane check, through everything. And on the plane, if Alice got up to walk around the plane, we'd walk with her. She went to the toilet, we'd walk with her. Eating food, I would have to take the foil off the aeroplane food. I'd give her the knife and fork, put the salt and pepper on, butter her bread, because her mind was not up to anything. Her mind couldn't focus on anything. She was so busy keeping herself above water with all these voices telling her so much to do. So credit to Alice, and we don't know how we got home. Like, we really don't.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. So we were blessed, and I do think it's a lot with the tapping of the nexting. Alice would call it nexting. And Alice,
I like that.
Yeah, and Alice's belief in us, I think, had a lot to do with it. But of course, this is me saying this. At the time, I'm sure she had no idea what she was doing, and she was just following us, and we were pushing her in a direction I don't think she cared or knew that she was going in, only that she was probably with safe people. I don't know.
On one occasion, I think my delusion actually was Team Martin family. I think it was like, I believed in the taxi on the way to the airport that if I sat up, that they would be watching, like I don't know, the ominous like Syrian government, the Turks, the French, all of
Yeah.
them would be watching, and so I just lay down. But if you look at that again, you could see that if I sat up and looked out the window, that would be 1,000 times more stimulating for a psychotic brain. So lying
Absolutely.
down, like a way to calm myself, I was lying down the whole way in the taxi to the airport. Yeah.
With these incredible people, because I'm, thinking just being able to get hold of you, with modern phones now, it's quite hard to get into them, passcodes, Face ID, just the fact that they managed to get hold, but what does that sound? I'm going to bring in the whole, the compassion. Strangers, people can never cease to amaze us with their compassion, their kindness, but because it's one thing if you see someone in an immediate situation and you're providing help, but to stay with her, to support her in that way, that's almost another whole story in itself, isn't it?
It
What
was
is it
amazing.
about about the kindness of those people that stayed with you, kept you safe, got you to that airport? It was a really powerful metaphor of them literally standing around you. That got me then.
Yeah, I was really lucky that I met a group of people that deeply cared, and they got to know me like briefly before I was really unwell, but they really cared about me, and there was lots of compassion for me, and I don't really know how they managed to handle me for as long as they did before contacting my family, before they arrived. Like, I was trying to do walkabouts in the middle of the night and not helping around the house, just being a big bum, I guess. Not able to help.
They would one of them would put her mattress against the front door, and she would sleep against the front door to keep Alice inside, because at night Alice would just want to go and walk, and they decided that wasn't a very safe option for Alice to do.
Yeah.
So they were amazing. When we arrived at the airport, they were exhausted. They were truly exhausted, and we'll never know why they didn't just push Alice out onto the street and wipe their hands of her, other than that they are the most amazing people that we have met and we've had the pleasure to meet.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and Hussein is one of the kindest people that we will meet. He is the one that contacted us, and he and Alice were having a lovely love affair, and we still have contact with him today and feel really blessed.
I was going to ask that. I was just wondering whether you have contact with any of them and kind of what that means for you as well.
Well, for me, I tell him that he's part of our family, and that he will always be welcome, and there will always be a bed here in Australia if he ever makes it over. And I think that I don't think he realises how important he is to us. I think he thinks that he just did what everybody else would do. I truly don't think he thought that he was doing anything extraordinary.
That's wonderful in itself, isn't it? That people have that hope in humanity and that expectation. I think there's something quite nice in that, in a way.
I think so. And I think with mental health, it can be so scary to be confronted by mental ill health, so that for him to acknowledge it and to not be scared by it and to do something about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I guess there's so many things I want to get in. Obviously, talking from a parent's perspective, because I know you've all written this book, but also for people listening to this podcast, I quite like to have things that people can take away and think about right now. And then there's obviously the longer term things that they can do to create a shift. That we want to bring in things like stigma. Sometimes there can be shame attached to having a mental health issue, and what it's like if you're someone who might be supporting or even coming across someone, because sometimes we don't know what to do. And I think we need a bit of compassion with that, for many people who don't have an experience of mental health or supporting someone. You might not know what to do, but what can someone do to kind of lean in to those tricky feelings, and not just avoid? I'm just thinking some of the work that you do now, some of the people that you must have met since this time, what are the small things that people can do? What helped you, Alice, or has continued to help you?
I guess just, I don't know. I feel like it's not really something that I need to be checked in on. But sometimes, I mean, like for the medication thing, for example, mum will sometimes say, have you taken your medication? Have you taken your
Yeah.
medication? Like, I don't mind that, but other people might mind that. So it's just sort of checking what the individual person, like, oh, do you mind if I
Yeah.
check in on you about this? Or
I think there are a couple of things that are with that. And the first thing was what you can do, and as a parent of a child or a friend of someone with mental health concerns, listen. Listening
Yeah.
is the best thing. Telling Alice that she's not feeling what she's feeling is not good.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think listening to Alice and acknowledging what she said. So not judging what she's saying, and sometimes that can be really hard.
Yeah.
That you wanna say, "Oh, why don't you do it this way?" And I probably do sometimes
That
tell
must
her
be
what
because
to think.
it's turning off that natural parent, and if
Yeah,
you've parented for a while, it can be a
but
bit of a default setting, can't it?
listening to someone, and also knowing a trigger. So if lack of sleep is a trigger, if bad relationships are a trigger, if taking
Yeah.
meds or forgetting to take your meds or taking them at the wrong time. And I soon learnt that Alice was really good at taking her meds. At no time did she ever not take her meds. The one thing that I do now ask her is, "How'd you sleep?" So she's now got one of those watches, smart watches, that tells her. So she'll just go, "Oh, I had this amount of sleep last night, Mum." So she preempts the question oftentimes.
Yes.
Or if she says, "I'm really tired," I go, "Oh, well, you better get some sleep tonight, Alice." So I think we have a really good and honest relationship, and that
Yeah.
has helped. She doesn't need to tell me everything, and I don't need to know everything, but we're very good with checking in on each other. Like, she asked me how
Yes.
I'm going, and I'm fine.
Well, I was just
yeah,
wondering that as well. Yeah. The two-way that what's it like for you as a parent, and do you like to
Yeah.
check in on Mum Alice as well?
Yeah.
yeah, mum has been complaining about her shocking sleep, so I've made her, I've encouraged her to get her own watch now. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's good.
Like kind of to help you. I've taken mine off, but yeah, I live by mine. But I always take it off when I'm podcasting because it bashes on the desk. It makes a noise. A couple of things that struck me there then is that kind of balance then between autonomy, because if you're someone with a lived condition, whether it's emotional health or physical health, sometimes people can mean well, but it can become a bit like, I guess, kind of helicopter support. They're there all the time because obviously there might be fear, there might be anxiety. You want the best for somebody, and if you've been through quite a traumatic experience as you guys have, then maybe that fear, what if something like this happens again? So getting that balance then, Alice, between your autonomy, so what you want, so and what you don't want, because I think that's obviously equally important as well. How can you get that balance of being supported in a way you need, but also do you ever feel you can say, oh, no thanks, or I'm okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what time, like how I'm feeling, because I'm obviously, well, not obviously, in case you don't know, I'm quite stable. I'm pretty
Yes.
regulated at the moment, but I do occasionally have the fear, oh, am I hypomanic? Am I doing things too fast? Am I not sleeping as much? Am I spending too much money? Am I doing risky things? Sometimes I have that question. So if I'm doubting myself, I don't mind a bit of extra assistance.
Yes. Yeah.
Alice
So
has
that
got
that balance.
Alice has got a wonderful psychiatrist that she sees that has been with her for 8 years now?
Okay.
Nearly 8 years. Yeah.
So nice established. Sometimes that fit's really important as well, isn't it, as a clinician, to someone you're working with? Yeah.
We feel really blessed that we and I often say we. I feel really blessed that it's the royal we, that it's not. It's all Alice, and she's the one that makes the strives and the challenges and fights the good fight, and and head on.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is good. which is good.
So for people listening who may be new to understanding about mental health conditions, maybe new to bipolar and the term psychosis, what's really important is being empowered to kind of understand your condition and understanding, as you said, Sarah, kind of triggers, maintaining factors, or sometimes we may look at protective factors or destabilizers. So things like if sleep's affected, life stressors, could be people and things that sometimes may destabilize us. And over here in the UK, sometimes we support people to have something called a relapse plan, so a relapse prevention plan. You may be familiar with that, Alice, in your psychology work as well, which for some people can be helpful to have as well. But the thing that really struck me that I'd read as well is that you'd said, actually, because sometimes you go in to do talks in schools, is that right?
We haven't yet, but
or is that something you were thinking of doing? Because I read somewhere about getting that balance. Oh, I know what it was. It was to do with, I'll edit this little bit out. Your brother, that was it. Is it your brother? You said, one of you'd said something about, I think it was your brother, Alice, who'd had much better kind of education around emotional health issues. And one of the things you'd said is you'd wished you'd had more kind of psychoeducation around emotional health when you were younger. Is that something you're comfortable talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I was very jealous hearing about Harry's experiences.
Right.
We had this school captain come in, or ex-school captain come in and talk to us about his journey. And I thought, okay, we never had any empowering women come and talk about mental health or challenges or, real things. So I was very jealous about that.
I think lived experience, like you spoke about earlier, Tara, is so important. People don't want to hear from me, like, oh, I was sad yesterday, but they want to hear from somebody who's lived it and dealt with it and how they've come through it. I think that's so important that not all mental health leads to disaster. Not all mental health means that you don't have a life. When we were first bringing Alice home, I thought, will she ever live out of home? Will she ever have a job again? Will Alice ever be able to do anything again? Will she be able to read and write? Can she think? She couldn't colour in those adult colouring in books. Her concentration was zero. I think it's so important out there for people to know that there is hope and that there is strength out there, and so much empathy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many, I could go off on so many tangents. It's that kind of preventative education, helping people know how to maintain good mental health in some cases. But for people who have acute onset episodes like yourself, that there's no history of anything, that, helping people understand how mental health can be impacted and when we might have acute episodes versus there might be more gradual changes in mental health that people might observe. And it's a really broad spectrum, isn't it? And that role of just psychoeducation. But hearing, again, we can read, interesting stuff in textbooks, we can listen to clinicians talk, but you can't literally ever replace a human experience, somebody talking about what this is like. And also, I think, I don't know if you did yourself justice there, Mum, that actually what it's like as a parent as well, for those people in that immediate supporting circle as well. I think actually there's a lot of rich information there as well, which is why I think your book is going to be so impactful for so many people. And hopefully after today, people listening, we'll go and pick up a copy and start. And I'm thinking, what are you hoping, if someone's to read the book, what are you hoping that will happen? How can we create a kind of a shift in how we understand mental health and stigma?
I think it's so important to break the silence. And so why has our book, Dear Psychosis, done so well? I think because breaking the silence is important. Mental health is important. Talking about stigma is important. Talking about psychosis, bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety is important. Anorexia, all mental health is so important. And you know what? There is no shame in any mental health. And there are so many people that are too scared to talk. And you know what? That's okay. When you're ready, you will talk. Or maybe by hearing our story, Alice's story, that that will become the survival guide for them, that they realise that this family, this girl has come through this, and then perhaps it won't be our story that they're retelling, and maybe it'll be their story that they retell.
I like that.
And
one of the things that you kind of mentioned was, obviously, as a parent, you've been through a lot. Alice, you've been through an awful lot as well. Is how did you navigate the kind of weeks and months once you got back home? Because I'm sure people will be really interested in what did that journey look like in terms of the treatment, the kind of support package that you had.
Well, we needed strength to get through. So we needed the right team. We needed a good psychologist and a good psychiatrist. We needed hope, so that if we went one step backwards, we needed to move forward. So it was always moving forward, even if it was an inch. We needed awareness. So I talked about it, the triggers. We needed to know if stress, bad relationships, lack of sleep. And we needed resilience. You need to talk about it, and you need to roll with the punches, so to speak. And we needed empathy to have with each other. So we needed to be able to listen to what Alice was saying and acknowledge what she was saying. Even if we didn't agree with what she was saying, we acknowledged it. And I think that was so important. We never said to Alice, "No, Alice, you're wrong. That never happened." No, we never said that. It was always, we acknowledge it, but it might not be what we agreed with, but we acknowledge.
So you're able to kind of validate on a level, because I think that's quite important
and
sometimes.
It's important to Alice to be heard.
Oh, absolutely.
And the other important thing was to grieve what we felt that we had lost. Like, we weren't sure whether we'd lost a daughter, whether we would ever find Alice again. And Alice was and is amazing.
I just wonder, Mum, how long did that feeling of, oh, I've lost her last for? Because I felt like I moved so quickly. It was December, and I was organising what I was going to do virtually with the next few years.
That's about 4 months after Alice's psychosis.
Right.
Now. Came back in September, October, November, December. And I was in hospital in October. So November, December, I was planning to join an English as a second language teaching course. And I did that, and that was a whole saga in itself. I started off doing it full-time and then realized very quickly I couldn't handle full-time work. I was hallucinating, like auditory hallucinations during the class, and bit distressing. So I thought, I've got to try and get into the part-time course, and I did. So I stopped doing the full-time course and then commenced the part-time course, which took 10 weeks. And then by July I was getting paid to teach international students. So I think, at what point did you realize, I haven't lost my daughter?
I reckon it was probably then, when Alice, we were away and somebody needed a translation, and Alice is fluent in Italian.
I'm not fluent.
Oh, okay. She's pretty
much
good.
better than the average person.
Much better than me. And somebody asked if she could translate something, and Alice said, "Oh, I can." And it was then that it was like, oh my God, Alice feels needed and wanted. Somebody's asked her to do something, and we'd forgotten that Alice needed this stuff. So, and this was in that December, and it was amazing. It was the best thing, and it was the kick that I needed. And I think you're right. I think it was probably at that time when Alice was, oh my God, Alice is good. She's getting there. They are baby steps, and they are all positive. But just remember that people need to be needed and wanted. Ask them to do stuff. If you're wondering what you can ask somebody.
That's a really good point. That kind of something about purpose.
Yeah, that's it. Purpose is a great word for it.
Yeah.
So what is interesting as well, if I can just come on to mum for a minute, is just bringing in that if you're supporting somebody through a kind of a mental health crisis or a longer term condition, is that experience must have been quite traumatic, having to jump on a plane, not knowing how things were going to be, the effect on physically doing that as well. It's just, did you feel you needed support yourself? Is that all right to ask?
I think I was distraught on
Yeah.
the plane, and fortunately, our oldest son was doing his final year of medicine, and he had a week off at that time. And
Okay.
I'm seriously a really bad traveller. I get motion
Okay.
sickness at anything, like on a
Right.
airlift, on a lilo on the water. I get a headache. I
Oh,
get sick. I get really sick. So my husband
that's
and I were like,
tough.
"Oh my God, Sarah's got to go over there, but oh my God, she might be vomiting everywhere." So when Jesse said he could take a week off because there was a week break, we had to weigh up the cost, because there's a substantial cost. But it was the best thing we could have done.
Yeah.
Traveling with a
Yeah.
psychotic girl would have been, I don't know how we could have done it by myself. So it actually
Yeah.
ended up to be one of the most amazing things. And so therefore, Jessie on the way over was able to keep me grounded. And we have this
That's
saying
really
now, that
nice.
we don't have shoulda, woulda, couldas in our house anymore. We have hindsight, foresight, and insight, so that we look back at what we could have
Yes.
done differently. And even Alice, before she left her travels, we don't have the shoulda, wouldas. We look back and see what we could have done better, and Alice included, when she was better, when she could
Yes.
get through and talk things through. So
This discussion was meant to be. So one of the things that I do a lot of in my clinical practice, we have a UK singer over here called Beverly Knight, and she had this massive single many years ago called Shoulda, Woulda, Coulda, and I use that as a, isn't that interesting you say that? So I use that as a metaphor so often with the people that I work with, of how sometimes those shoulda, woulda, couldas can just dominate and not kind of help us with kind of purposeful decision making and getting hooked with what we want to do versus what we should do.
Well, the shoulda, woulda, couldas can go round in like a mouse, like a mouse. Tumbleweed.
Like a hamster wheel. Yes.
So that you need to get off that. So what you need to do is see what you can do better, and there might not be much that you can do better. Maybe it's done. You've done all you can, but if there's one little thing, and it's like listening to something, like listening to your podcast, Tara. If somebody finds one thing, then listening to the podcast or listening to you is worth it. Like,
that's
just one
absolutely my
thing,
motto.
one takeaway.
Absolutely. I always do. So I always say at the end, don't I? We'll come on to that. I have my little takeaway, but people get so many. And I just think sometimes it's just reaching that one person who may not themselves be in a situation where they need advice, but they might then talk to someone else as well. That kind of ripple effect of, hang on, okay, maybe I will lean in, maybe I'll have this discussion. So kind of, one of the things, obviously the UK healthcare system is very different to what you have in Australia. Is it all right to ask, Alice, were there any kind of barriers to your support or any ongoing support needs that you might have? Because that's always an interesting thing to bring in as well. You've had a really supportive family, and obviously the healthcare system is different there, but anything that you've observed?
Yeah, I think we have sort of like a different process for if you see a psychologist for talking therapy.
Yes.
So it's like tricky to get extra sessions above 20 sessions is a bit tricky to get for rebates and stuff. I don't know all the details because, alas, I have a psychiatrist. But for me, it's really hard at the start of the year because it sort of refreshes and you have to go over a threshold.
So it's very expensive.
Money back. So
very expensive.
You need to save up for the start of the year. If you have a few spare coins, then after whatever it is, maybe 20 sessions, you'll be above the threshold, and then you'll start getting the full rebate of the session, which is
Yeah.
Okay.
So an interesting thing, this isn't about rebates or anything, but the interesting thing when we first got home to hospital and care, in the book, I actually probably up till I did about 10 edits, I had a very big whinge about we had to tell, and Alice had to tell her story 7 times in 4 hours to
Gosh.
it was the GP, then GP
Yes.
said, "Go to the hospital." So we went to the hospital. So it was the nurse, then a doctor, then a registrar, then the psych reg, then the nursing medical nursing mental health sister. Then there was the psychiatrist and then the psych registrar. There were 7 people, and I had a whinge to one of my friends who read the very last draft, and he said, "Sarah, here's the reason. The reason why you've told that story 7 times to those 7 different people is not because they want to make it painful for you. It's because we have a game in Australia, I don't know whether you have it in England, but it's called telephone. You have 10 people that stand in a line and you whisper something to the next person, and then
Okay,
that
yes,
person
yeah.
then whispers it to the next person. By the time it gets to the end person, you might have said, the man walked across the road with an umbrella, and by the time it gets to the end person, it's
Yes.
the duck said quack. And it's completely different. And this guy said to me, "Sarah, you're telling your story for the first time to that person, so every time that doctor or healthcare professional gets it right." So here I was,
Yes.
being a registered nurse myself, getting angry at the system. But 8 years later, I learned that actually it was the best thing we could have done by telling those healthcare professionals the
Yeah.
story right from our mouth. So please, if you are listening and you are getting frustrated by telling your story different times to other people, don't be. It's
Yeah.
better that you tell the story than someone else.
I
Is
think
it
that's
though?
really
It's
well put.
really surely very tiring for someone who's in an acute state to be
Yeah, very true.
rehashing what they're going through. It's also a bit confusing. Also, life goes so quickly, or time is weird when you are experiencing psychosis.
Yeah.
You might be staring at something
Yes.
for 8 hours and it might actually be like way longer or way shorter, but just feels like an eternity. So you experience things so differently. But I don't know, is it better to sort of codify someone's experience, say, okay, this is Alice, she's presenting with like psychotic symptoms, she has a past history of,
And then that written word then gets transferred to yeah, I agree with that too.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Talking to somebody in the throes of psychosis or depression or anxiety, you don't want to talk about that. And I guess if you're and we should take the luck out of mental health, so that if you're lucky enough to have a parent or a loved one or an acquaintance that can tell the story for you, then that's great. But not everybody has that fortune to be able to do that. So you're right, Alice. That's a really good point.
That kind of balance of compassion versus the utility in being able to hear the story firsthand as a clinician. So, as you say, it's not lost somewhere along the line, but at the same time, the compassion for I'm just thinking as a parent, thinking we've told this so many times and we just want to get on with somebody supporting you. But also from your point of view, Alice, then in terms of actually it's fatiguing, and sometimes for some people it's quite risky, asking them to be relaying things. There are certain ways you need to do that depending on how they present and what they've been through as well. It's some of this stuff in the book. So one of the things I just want to come on to is how is this book going to help? What did you want to get in it? What do you want to get people to take from it then?
So if I describe the book, the cover starts discussion before you even pick it up.
Yeah.
It is the picture of Alice with big, thick, black marking pen drawn all over her face. The reason we chose that cover was, number one, that Alice was 100% behind it, was that we wanted to start discussion.
Yeah.
And even if you don't pick the book up, it starts discussion. You might not buy the book, and that's okay, but maybe you'll go home and say, wow, I saw
It pops out, doesn't it?
a
Yeah.
picture of a girl on a cover that was called Dear Psychosis, and you started a conversation, and it's about mental health. So the reason purely behind Dear Psychosis is starting conversation, breaking the silence, and definitely breaking the stigma down of mental health.
And are there some sections in the book, about, because it's written in the form of almost like a letter, isn't it? Dear Psychosis, it's talking to. I quite like, because one of the things I do in my work sometimes is something called externalization, whereas rather than saying your depression, it's the depression or the whatever it is, and talking to it. And I'm just wondering where the idea of the Dear Psychosis came from. What was the thinking behind that for you?
No, you know what? We had so many titles that I would come and I'd go, how about this one? And one day I got out of bed and I went, I have it. It's Dear Psychosis. And that was it. So there was no rhyme nor reason. And everybody went, oh, yeah, that's good. Oh, we like it. And it says what it is. So there's no doubt when you get the book, it is certainly a story of strength and hope and love. And I think but there is no doubt what it's about. And I do say that it is not a woo-woo book. I'm not telling anyone what to do. Alice and Jessie have written in the book. So you hear Alice's experience at home in Istanbul with psychosis, and you hear our son's journey with us of him looking at me and looking at Alice and giving feedback. And it's originally when I asked Alice, I thought, oh, I'm going to be the best writer in this. But what Alice has written is amazing. It's an amazing insight into her delusions and what she was going through. And they are confronting and fascinating, and no holds barred account of what she went through. So,
and that in itself, I don't think many people actually, unless you're working in the kind of mental health field, I'm not sure people really, as we said kind of at the beginning, really know what delusions can present like, what hallucinate, what even the difference between those, just understanding the concepts and then the lived experience of it. I think actually for a lot of people that would be really useful as well.
Well, it's really interesting, and it will blow some people's minds sort of how quickly my delusions evolve and how that turns into a hallucination. I think that the title Dear Psychosis, looking back now, like compared to what Mum was going for, I think it was quite a dear psychosis. I think the psychosis in Istanbul was very sheltered, very intense. The flavor was safe and spicy at the same time. Very overwhelming, obviously, for a young person's mind. So it took me about a year to sort of feel a bit like myself again. But compared to my second psychotic episode, which happened a few years later, it was very dear to me, I guess. The memories weren't painful, whereas the second psychosis was a lot more dangerous and intense and confronting. So that's not something I would probably write a book about. But
and just helping people understand that, that it can present in so many different ways.
It can. Yeah.
It wasn't until the second psychosis that Alice, so that was 3 years later. 2 years later, Alice was diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder. So it wasn't until then. So it was a considered diagnosis that wasn't straight away. So that's
according to the books. According to the diagnostic manual.
And in terms of, obviously, as well, one of the things I like to bring into my work is that some people like to use diagnostic terms, some people prefer not to, but that it's important that it's what sits well with the individual in terms of how they describe.
Yeah, exactly. There was a period where I preferred manic depression. Because I thought bipolar sounds too colloquial. I still prefer manic depression, but that's again, it doesn't represent me now. It doesn't
Yes.
represent, it's like a hidden thing. Like, okay, now it's in, I don't know whether to use, what would the term be for diabetes? Like it's stable or it's a safe blood sugar level.
Yeah.
I'm like regulated at the moment, I guess. So
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like I have manic depression. I'm not suffering from it, at least. But I feel like that encapsulates the highs and the lows a bit more than bipolar. What is bipolar? What is the bi in bipolar?
Both, isn't it?
Yeah, both. Yeah, both what?
Yeah.
It's important, isn't it? The meaning is really important. So what are next steps looking like for both of you then? So obviously we'll come on to where people can get hold of the book and where they can find you, but what are you wanting to do? So obviously you're looking at your career in psychology, but what do both of you want to do in terms of kind of, getting your message out there, helping others?
Well, I'm doing a little bit of speaking at the libraries and in groups, which is great. I just, to get the word out, to break that silence. And people need to know that mental health is in families just like mine and just like yours out there in the ether.
Yeah.
It doesn't care what side of the road that you live on or what school you went to. Doesn't care.
That's a really good point.
That's okay. It's all okay. So I do hope to break that silence and stigma. And I've been thinking more of going down the mental health nursing track. Just have to think about, I'd love to work at where Alice was hospitalised. I'd love to work there. That was a wonderful, wonderful place. But I know that you can't always pick and choose where you work. So at this stage, just
but
getting
we can have hope, can't you?
Yes, of course we can. Of course we can.
Yeah.
I just love breaking the silence, and I think getting anywhere to speak is a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, sometimes it just takes that one person. We might not know how much you can impact someone's life. And I just think that's remarkable. So if people need to get a hold of you, how can they find you? Where do you hang out? Where do you hang out online?
Well,
so what I would do, I'm going to do a screenshot of this now so that I can put that on. There we go. I'll do a couple of screenshots so that we can put that out. I'll edit this little text bit out for a minute, but I'll just do some screenshots and then I can put those out. And then perfect. So where can people find you? Where do you hang out online? So your book is out. Is that available in all kind of bookshops? Is it on Amazon globally?
So it's definitely on Amazon, Booktopia, Goodreads, anywhere on the internet where you buy your books. Because we're self-published, it's on my website.
Okay, brilliant.
You can buy the website. But if you're in England or UK, you probably would like to go on Amazon and buy. It's digital, it's on ebook, and it's in hardcover book.
Fantastic.
The sad thing with self-published people is that bookshops rarely take you because you are self-published. So our local bookshop here in Sydney, where we live, we've sold 65 books alone just in this one bookshop, and we've sold probably 20 more in another bookshop that I'm in. So what does that tell me? It tells me that mental health matters. And I'm sad that the book isn't in bookshops because I know that more people would read it and more people would feel less alone. And that's the thing as a parent.
Yeah.
I felt so alone. I had nobody to talk to. In fact, we remained silent for about 2 or 3 years after Alice was diagnosed with psychosis. So
we need to tap into that as well, don't we?
Yeah.
That, people listen now and go and click and read, or if they know someone else whose family's been through something, that they can recommend a book as well. That power of narrative, isn't it? So you're sarahmartinauthor.com, aren't you? And you're on Instagram, aren't you, as well? sarahmartin.author. I'll put all of this in the show notes as well.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. I look forward. Please, if anyone contacts or joins me on Instagram, make sure you tell me that you've seen Tara's podcast and that you loved it or whatever. We'd love to hear from you.
Drop
So
some
please
stuff
let
in the
us know.
comments. Absolutely.
We say
and
we love more mental health warriors, the better.
yeah, absolutely. And what I love is I get to connect with these just incredible people, incredible journeys, just being able to share them and taking the time to do that. I'm really appreciative of. So
Well, we love connecting with you.
Thanks.
I've been really excited as well. So we have to we'll do another plug for Mark. We'll say thanks to Mark for putting us out there. And life's about connections, isn't it? So if we have a little ripple effect, but it's also about meeting people. So we've had so many nuggets about dealing with adversity, but again, showing my age now, my signature move at the end. If you were to both give me an adversity takeaway, what would that be? If there's one extra piece that you want to leave us with, have you got any ideas, Alice?
Oh, I'm thinking about the rainbow fish. Like, there's this book, I don't know, have you heard of it?
No, I haven't. No, the rainbow fish.
Yeah, so there's this fish and it has lots of little colors shimmering all over it, and the other fish get jealous and they ask if they can have just one piece of color. And then in the end, everyone has color and the rainbow fish just has one color. I think it's okay to share, but make sure that you don't lose all your color along the way. And if you do, then maybe someone else will give you a bit of their color, like it's about sharing.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. I'm going to be hunting that book now.
Yeah. And mine is just know that you are not alone. There's someone out there that you can speak to. And if you can't speak to them, write it on a Post-it note or in a little card to say that you're not okay and give it to someone. There's always someone. We hear you. Alice and I hear you. Tara hear you.
Do you know what you need to do? Put that on your Instagram. You need to do a reel. Start that off as a little viral thing. Put it on a note, I'm not okay, or even just a question mark or something.
So many
really
people
like that idea.
So write it down.
Sometimes that's the first step, isn't it? Writing it. It can be hard to say things, but in this modern world, we can forget the power of the pen. I think as well.
We can.
Sometimes we can. Sarah and Alice, it's been so lovely. I know you've had a super long day, and I really appreciate it. Always say this to people when I have different. I so appreciate the flexibility when you're able to come on, because I know you Instagram me. I think it was like midnight our time, so long day for you. But I'm so pleased. I can't wait to get this episode out there, and let's get people talking. And if they're not talking, let's get them writing as the first step. That's what I'm going to leave.
That's it.
So